Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I could get all political and talk about guns. I'm not gonna do that. What I will say is that I love America, and when I was growing up, I felt like we were the best country in the world. But things have changed. We are now a country that values the life of an unborn child more so than the life of a 10-year-old. We are a country that cares more about guns than doing the right thing. And through all of this, I hope first and foremost that my kid is safe when going to school and the mall and really anywhere that he goes in public. And I also hope that even those staunch gun supporters never have to hear that their child was gunned down anywhere. We are the only country in the world that this shit happens to. And we've already had 27 school shootings this year. It's fucking crazy. Kinda makes me miss the lockdown. At least then we knew our kids were safe from gunfire. Maybe what we all need to do is just get our kids away from potential danger as much as possible. Get them out in the mountains, get them on bikes, and crap, it's summertime, take them camping. And camping is something that I've always had mixed emotions about. While I have fun doing it, I always have a terrible night of sleep, and I'm in a fog most of my trip because of sleep deprivation. But not anymore. I have a buddy, Aaron M. Buskey, who was known for engineering some of the greatest skis ever built. After his ski career, he identified an issue with camping, the lack of a good night's sleep, and he solved it by creating the Hess sleep system. Think a temperature-resistant, durable memory foam mattress that's more comfortable than my Westin Heavenly bed. They're really that comfortable, and they come with a 100-night money-back guarantee. I love mine, and if you're a tent camper, car camper, truck conversion camper, or van lifer, or you just need another comfortable, portable bed at your house, Hess is the only choice. You can find out all about the sleep systems over at Hess.com. While Hess is great, hopefully my rant didn't put you to sleep, as part 2 with Wendy Fisher is going to blow your mind. While Wendy hinted at depression and an eating disorder in episode 1, we dive deep into those subjects and talk about the big mountain phase of her career as well. Wendy shares so much in this episode, and she paid me the ultimate compliment after part 1 that I'm going to read to you. Here's what Wendy had to say. Just released is the first of 2 interviews with Mike Powell for his podcast, The Powell Movement. I highly recommend his podcast. He has great interviews with so many industry people. I learned so many new and interesting facts about all these amazing people. In my interview, I talk about a part of my life a lot of people do not know about. Mike definitely got me to open up more than I ever have before. I guess it was time to share my personal struggles. I trained myself to suppress and hide a part of me I didn't want people to know about, except for a few close friends. This is the kind of feedback that gets me going. The goal is to get people to open up and tell their whole story, and that's not always comfortable. So thank you for the kind words and opening up, Wendy. If you were a fan of Wendy's in the 90s, while it's not the happiest stuff, it's really cool to know the backstory that none of us would have guessed. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show, and if you like a particular episode, please share that post so others can have an easy link to it. Finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors who make the show happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, and the Hess Sleep System. Now, let's talk with Wendy Fisher. When we left off last time, you had left the U.S. ski team and you went on to go ski race in college. Was there a feeling of defeat at all when you did that?
It was, yeah. I had a big feeling of defeat just because sports are weird because you start such a young age and you put so much time and energy into it and your whole upbringing. And then the next thing you know, you're on this path of success or achievement. And then it took a 180 and kind of just lost control of where I was in my race career. So I left very deflated. I left super bummed out that I couldn't get my shit together. And, I kind of left our last conversation a little uncomfortable with how I ended it because it's really the first time that I've ever mentioned being depressed or having suicidal thoughts. But I guess maybe it's kind of how I feel in my next chapter that I'm entering in my life. And over 40 plus years of dealing with this, I guess I feel in the place to open up about it. And ultimately what happened was, at the end of my racing career, I just was in such a dark place that I had to quit. Even though I didn't want to, there was still just a part of me that was so attached to wanting to be a better racer. And I feel like I had more to prove. But in the end, for my mindset, I had to quit, which I wouldn't say it helped my eating problem. I definitely still dealt with depression, but those horrible thoughts went away for a while. And so I entered college. I couldn't go to CU anymore because I was too old, and I accepted money. So I got accepted for a scholarship at an NCSA school at Sierra Nevada College, which is actually in my hometown. So yeah, I moved back home, and I wasn't really excited to race, but it was a free education. So I did it, but my heart wasn't into it. Once I think dangling the carrot of like the Olympics, not being there anymore, I finally, and I worked out so hard. When I was on the US ski team, I made it to every dryland camp. I did all my workouts. I trained all the time. I showed up on time. I was like this studious athlete with no regrets. But when I went to college, I just was like, I'm done. I can't do this. So I didn't put a lot of heart and energy into it. I'd be late for practice. I really didn't care. Like one day I showed up late for an early lift ride, and there was no one at the lift to load us, but we had to load one chair and then get to another one. And I was studying anatomy, so I always have flashcards with me. And I got on the lift late and no one saw me get on. And I'm basically like one tower away from getting off and they stopped it. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm stuck on the lift.
Frozen.
And I'm like, oh my God, I kind of had a panic. And all of a sudden I'm like, sweet, I don't have to train. I'll just sit back here in the chair and study my flashcards and study anatomy. And then our coach, it was the 94, 95 season, I believe. Anyways, after the 94 Olympics, but a bunch of us retired from Lake Tahoe, like Bill Hudson, Todd Kelly, Edie Teese, this Canadian girl, José Lacasse, who is with the Canadian national team. We all just retired. We're all former Olympians, and we're all on this team together. And a lot of Slovenians were there and Norwegians.
So it's just stacked with World Cuppers?
Yeah, stacked. And this coach, he gloated about it. Like, I have the best college team. And he put on a race that Paul Mitchell sponsored, and he invited all the NCAA and top colleges in the country to come compete against us because he's like, I have the best team. And so a bunch of colleges came. I can't really remember the names of all the colleges. And in college seating, the coach determines where you start in the starting order.
Okay.
And he didn't start me very high up because I just wasn't putting the effort into it. So we get to the race, and my typical style is I see a bunch of old teammates I haven't seen forever, or people who I used to ski race that I hadn't seen forever. And I get really talkative and social and having fun. And the next thing you know, it's time for me to get in the gate, and I go. And I won the run by a second or so. And I'm always blown away. I'm just like, wow, that's the best I've skied in 2 years. When I left the ski team, I thought basically I forgot how to ski. I mean, I could just not even get down a course. And I'm like, where did all my skiing go? So then I ended up winning the race. And it was just another thing to line the dots up to what made me tick and what didn't. And I was like, I just need to be happy. Like, that's what makes me tick, is being happy. And I just didn't have that happiness on the ski team. So that made me feel good. I finished out the year. I won the NCSA title, whatever that means, not much. But I finished the year with some mental success of like knowing myself a little bit better. And we're heading into the next season. And all of a sudden, I think we had an early race. I got in the starting gate and I could barely push out the starting gate. I'm like, I just cannot keep doing this. I don't have the heart for it. And the scholarship did not mean, the financial help was not that important to me because I was mentally getting down again.
Right. It's not worth your happiness.
Right. So then I write my dad a letter and my coach a letter. I write that I'm giving up my scholarship and I'm quitting school. And I added on to my dad's letter that I'm taking my summer vacation now, and it's like December. And I'm going to go find a place where I can mountain bike and go to summer school because I was obsessed with working out for my eating reasons. So I wanted to become a mountain biker, or I wanted to get into eco challenge. I just wanted to do something that you just torture yourself. So I told my dad I'm going to take my summer vacation now and I called it my road trip to never ski again. And I just wanted to have fun one last winter. So I faxed that letter to my dad in San Francisco and I slipped the letter under my coach's door. I never see my coach again. I was living with ski team teammates. That morning, we woke up, they went to school. I ended up packing up my room, taking everything back to my parents' place. I never saw anyone again.
Holy crap.
I didn't say bye. I just ghosted. And then I remember the day I was driving out of town, I got in a car accident. I squished wrecked my front end. And I remember calling my dad and I think I was crying. I was just so distraught because I literally was driving to Utah. And my dad's like, well, does the car still run? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, find a body shop when you get to Utah. And I was like, oh my God, I still get to go. And I ended up calling friends that I knew in other ski areas to see if I could come stay with them. And then I also called the head of the US ski team, the women's coach. I called him and told him I was coming out to Utah and if I could get help with tickets or something. And he told me he had a gold pass. So I end up in Utah in Park City and I stay with an old classmate of mine and I go and get the gold pass. And my coach says, okay, you can have this for 2 weeks, but don't take it out of the state. Anyway, I end up skiing in Alta, Snowbird. I went up to Sun Valley. My friend was teaching the Park City team and they are all driving up for a race. So I hopped in the van with all these kids with the gold pass, and then I ended up in Crested Butte and met all these skiers and got talked into staying there for a while. So I went to the ticket office and I got 2 weeks worth of lift tickets with this gold pass. And then I FedExed it back to my coach.
That's amazing. There's so many things that we need to unpack here. And I was totally going to pass over the whole eating thing because I really didn't want to get deep into a conversation about it. We're not going to get deep into it, but you've talked about it a few different times. I don't understand eating disorders, but I'm guessing it stems from maybe your depression. And have you been able to unpack why you were having that back then, now? Was it just a way to cope with all the bad things that were going on in your life? Like, where does it stem from?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. Because I did not have an eating problem growing up. I ate nothing but junk food. I used to go to cross-country meets, and I'd carry a cooler onto the bus full of Cokes and Snicker bars. My mom didn't make me lunches because a teacher called up my mom and said, Wendy throws her lunch away every day. This is an elementary school.
Okay.
And my mom's like, fine, I'm not making you a lunch anymore. So I never packed a sandwich. I always had just chips and sugar cookies and candy bars. I just loved junk and I was super active. So that probably helped. I was really teeny. My grandmother always thought I was anorexic and other people thought I wasn't eating enough, but it wasn't like I wasn't unhealthy. I would totally eat steak and potatoes too, but I did like my junk food. And, at Burke, we're super active and I worked out a lot and I ate so much. So there's a few things that I reflect back on. And when I was at Burke, I ate a ton. I remember filling my plate up with pasta and like 4 pieces of French bread. And we got ice cream that night. And I got my 2 scoops of ice cream. And my dorm parent didn't want his. So then I got his 2 scoops of ice cream. And I sat down at this table, my table. And I remember being kind of alone. I just sat down. And I remember looking at my food like super excited to eat. And these 3 older girls come and sit down next to me. And they surround me. And they go, Wendy, we're going to sit here and make sure you eat all of this. And I'm like, no problem. In my head, I'm like, I'm so stoked to eat all this.
Right.
And they said, you just wait. You just wait, Wendy. And I remember being like, I know they're meaning something by this, but I don't know why they're saying this to me. And, I kind of packed it away. I knew it was something, there was meaning behind it. I really didn't think a lot about it, but it was there in my brain. And then I remember when other girls were getting bigger and boys would be like, oh, look at so-and-so getting bigger and making comments. And I would just hear it. And again, that's just something I tucked away. And again, I was really petite and teeny. I mean, the coaches at Burke before I even went there didn't think I was going to amount to anything because I looked like I had no muscle. So then, like I said, I went and worked out with the Sacramento Kings. I became so strong. I should have been elated and happy. And I went to a November ski camp. I think I mentioned this in the last one. Stepped on the scale, saw that I gained like 25 pounds. And my coaches were stoked. But all of a sudden, I'm like, I remember what those girls meant. And now I'm one of the girls the boys are talking about. And now I'm big. and I don't want to be big. Like, I don't want this. I was like, I was a good skier being skinny. Why can't I go back to skinny and a good skier? And I do reflect back, like the ski team didn't know I created an issue, but right then and there, I decided to stop eating.
Huh.
I tried being anorexic. Yeah, I tried not to eat, but I was always so hungry. So I couldn't pull that off, and we're working out a lot. I tried to be bulimic, but I just couldn't make myself throw up.
Yep.
So then it just became, I forgot, I can't remember the technical term of it, but it became where I had to work out. Once I worked out, then I'd eat a little because I was starving, but then I had to work out again. Like the moment I ate, I would already start thinking of the next workout.
You're just trying to burn the calories you're eating?
Right. And I wanted to slim back down. And I never slimmed back down. I think now I reflect back because I eventually did, which is years later without even trying. But I think I was trying to slim down, but I was maintaining what I developed. But it got to the point where I was so fatigued and tired because I was limiting what I was eating and trying to work out in the wrong way for ski racing, where I had no oomph in my muscles. Like the muscles still showed, like I was still this big ski team body girl, but it just lacked the oomph. And also my mental side was not helping me with the oomph either, because, like I said, the random moments I'd be happy, I would perform. So I think it was the body image thing. I didn't think I was very pretty. So I thought, God, I'm not very pretty. And now I'm big. Like, that's not great combination to find a boyfriend. And, I just kind of added things on. And then I think it became more of a control thing. Like I was losing control of me, but that's one thing it could kind of control is what I ate and how I worked out.
Yeah.
And it just morphed into years and years of, a mental struggle with it.
And how?
The ski team sent me to an eating disorder therapist in Salt Lake City because finally they saw something was going on. I collapsed. We were at Bend, Oregon, I think, a bachelor training, and we did like a max weightlifting test. Like they wanted to see what all our max lifting was. And it was my turn to do squats at like the warm up weight. And I squatted down and never came back up.
Oh.
And I was just like, what's wrong with Wendy? So I went to the eating disorder therapist a few times, but he just said some wrong things to me that set me off to think I'm just a generic person. Like he didn't really get to know me first before he started assuming what was going on. And that pissed me off. So I'm like done with this guy. In 93, after that therapist, the summer of 93, I went to Aspen and I worked with the clinical psychologist that my agent found for me. Her name was Julie Anthony, and she used to be a pro tennis player and competed against Billie Jean King. Okay. And she was a clinical psychologist now. And then I also, for one last stab at trying to get myself better, I went to a sports psychologist also. So I'm in Aspen seeing a sports psychologist and a clinical psychologist. And then I met this wonderful lady. Her name's Lizzie Tallenfeld, who kind of took me in. And her husband ex-husband now was on the U.S. ski team as well. And he dealt with a lot of stuff. And so she was kind of this sidebar therapist because we'd work out together. And she would always just tell me over and over on our runs and bike rides, do not let the ski team F you up. And she would just repeat that all the time. And I think that stuck with me more than anything. Just this will pass, hopefully.
And when did it finally pass? When were you finally able to get that under control and not have to think about it all the time?
Years. I mean, I would say I probably shook it just around when I had my first son, Axel. He was born in 2005. And it was just after that. I remember before I had him thinking to myself, if I knew I wouldn't blow up to be 300 pounds, I would stop working out. I am so exhausted mentally thinking about all the workouts that I feel like I have to do. And if I don't do them, I break down. Like I would just feel emotional wreck. Like, oh my God, I didn't go on my bike ride today. What's going to happen to me? Like it was a brain stress more than anything because it wasn't like I was overtraining anymore. It wasn't like I was doing 3 workouts a day. I was just still doing, a bike ride or something.
Sure.
But it was constantly in my brain. Like, watch what I eat and when am I going to work out? Watch what I eat. When am I going to work out? Like those are just in my thoughts all the time. So I just wanted to get rid of that It's like a dog chasing their tail. I'm like, I just want to stop this in my brain. So then I got pregnant and I'm like, sweet, I'm going to get fat anyway. So I might as well just let it happen. And I stopped working out. I mean, I stopped working out in my terms. I still was a decent, for average kind of workouts. I still biked a little and ran a little. It's not like I completely did nothing.
Right.
But for me, it was. So I ended up, because I walked a lot, I ended up trimming down. My body changed so much. And I became more confident and happy about my body and who I was. And it's such a shame that I weighed so much pressure on that because it really fucked up my career. And I thought about that. I'm like, oh my God, if I would have known that it was just for a time period, like you have control of your body. And I feel like that if the US ski team or people just came to me and said, Wendy, if you want to be a successful skier, you have 10 years of your body looking strong and powerful and blah, blah. Like if that's what you want to be the top in the world, this is the package you need. But we never had anyone talking about that. I wasn't prepared to gain all that weight. And I take other people's opinions too much, like what other people think of me, I guess. I don't anymore. I'm older now and I could give a shit about a lot of stuff.
Right.
But when I was younger, I was just so impressionable and had just too much going on inside. And that's the other thing. I kept everything inside, which I'm sure a lot of people will be surprised that I'm even saying this because a lot of this stuff I've never really spoken about.
It's amazing. You're an open book right now, which is phenomenal. And we're not going to keep talking about this, but I'm glad that you got this under control or you're able to manage it because it sounds like it was something that really just weighed on you every single day of your life until after you have a kid. I could make a joke of, oh, you should have just got pregnant at 17 and then you wouldn't have to think about it later. But I'm not going to make that joke.
Oh, yeah.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. This summer, make Peter Glenn your one-stop shop for all of your fun needs. Think everything you'll want or need for wakeboarding, inline skating, hiking, swimming. You get the idea. Peter Glenn has the best brands at the lowest prices. And if you find a lower price from a reputable storefront, Peter Glenn will match that price. There's a reason Peter Glenn has been around for over 60 years, and that's because they're the best. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, check out the fit and finish of the 22 Rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So you had gone to Utah, and then you went to Crested Butte, and there was a rumor that I heard, and I don't know if it's true, so I might as well ask you. Was there a thought or some talk about you being in the new K2 Performers movie that they were going to be shooting back then? Or is that just a rumor that I heard?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this, if it rolled into the whole scenario. But yeah, so this is when I was entering my second year at Sierra Nevada, and I was in Tahoe City at Humpty's. And I run into Jim Omarion, and he says to me, hey, Wendy, K2's putting a movie together, The Performers, and they're looking for a girl. And I thought about you, but you're in college or you're in school. And I looked at him like, I'll quit. I mean, I didn't even hesitate. I'm like, I'll quit. And then it was on my brain. I'm like, I can't fucking do this anymore. I can't. And then I was at a ski event, a celebrity event, and I was asked to be a team captain. And, they always have like stars or models or whatever. And they always have like a pro skier or former ski racer as the team captain to race other former racers. And I'm at the start, and the girl I'm racing against is Kim Reichhelm. And she makes a comment. She's like, "Oh, Wendy Fisher, former Olympian, is going to kick my ass." And I look at her and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And my other problem was I never tuned my skis. I mean, I had someone tune my skis all through my ski career, and I just didn't really care about tuning my skis. It's sheer ice, and we go, and I have zero edges, and I am barely able to get around the gates. I am like a child skiing down. Like I mentioned, the Stontiners in the last podcast, Hansi Stontiner was at the bottom, and he's like, "Wendy, you look like a 7-year-old coming down." And Kim beat me, and I'm like, "I know," and I'm about to cry. I'm just like, freaking can't do this anymore. And I looked at Kim, I'm like, "I can't do this anymore." And she's like, "Oh, here's my number. Give me a call if you come to Crested Butte." So then that was like the next thing that kind of lined up to me being like, okay. So it's like little breadcrumbs being dropped for me to pick up and take the hint to move on. And, again, my brain was getting to that desperate point of where it shouldn't be. And so that's what made me quit and move on. So she was the one person I contacted when I came to Crested Butte and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. Can I take you up on your offer to come stay with you?" So I kind of just planned this road trip around people who said yes to me to come stay with them.
And she's one of those awesome people that'll definitely throw out the invitation and extend it to you. And most people aren't going to take her up on it, but you did, and you go up and you stay with her in Crested Butte. Do you have any idea that there's an extreme competition going on in Crested Butte, or are you just showing up there to stay with Kim and ski?
I just showed up and stayed, and then quickly got introduced to Steve Winter, Murray Wais, now my husband, Woody, got just introduced to all these skiers, and I met up with them, and quickly people are like, "You should stay for the comp that's coming here." And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about it." It didn't totally appeal to me, but then it kind of did also. That's why I then got the 2 weeks of tickets, because it was in 2 weeks. So I'm like, well, at least I should stay to check it out.
Okay.
And then the more I skied with people were like, you should enter, you should enter. And, back in Tahoe, before I even hit the road, I was skiing with some kids when I was ditching training with my team. I remember skiing with them, and they're like, "Wendy, you should do the extreme comp." So I already knew that they went on. So I ended up entering, and people started showing me the lines just for Headwall. So if people know the venues in Crested Butte, Headwall was the first day. But before the comp day, people were like, "Well, Wendy, I'll show you where the girls ski." And so they would take me, and I saw the venue of where the girls skied, and people were telling me I needed to not ski so aggressively. I needed to ski more feminine and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty funny, because I look back and I never changed that. So contest day comes, and I skied where all the girls went. You cross over Angle Gully and went down. I think my line was fine. There's really only just like a few little jumps you can hit. Otherwise, it's a pretty open slope.
Okay.
So this is where things really change, is I get to the bottom, and Shane walks up to me, and I didn't even know he's there. And he's like, "Hey, Wendy." And he was starting late in the men. So we were at the bottom hanging out together, and we're watching, and the men start skiing down and hitting this area called Angle Gully, where it's like really rocky and ratty and airs and all this stuff. And these guys are hitting it. And I look at Shane, and I'm like, "Oh my God, Shane, I'm a better skier than that guy. Can I do that?" Because these guys are in the back seat, just keeping it together, but just super loose at the same time.
Don't have the training you have on skis.
Yeah. And not to say that, obviously there's a ton of great skiers in the world who were not ski racers, but I was looking at these guys going, I have the best training in the world. Like, I have been trained my whole life, and I knew I was better than that person, or at least could do what they're doing. And I kept saying that to Shane, like another guy would come down and like, "Oh my God, Shane, can I do that?" And he just kept saying yes, yes to everything. And then I'm like, "Well, what should I do?" And we talked about a line. And then I went back up there. All the girls went back into their area. And then I start skiing down to this rocky ridge. And I line up an air that goes into Eagle Gully. And basically, it's like a straight line that just has enough width for your skis when you land.
Okay.
And then you shoot out. And so I start doing this line. And the crowds in Crested Butte back then were amazing. It's like hundreds of people at the bottom with barbecues, kegs, lounge chairs. And when they saw where I was going, because it was totally in the opposite direction of where all the girls went, everyone just started screaming and roaring. And I got to the top and I took a moment and I paused because I was like, holy shit, this is so cool. Like, I was just like, oh my God. And I stuck the air, the landing. I did like 3 super G turns down to the bottom. And this is on 200 GS skis with derby flex and my bent GS poles. Like, and I get to the bottom and people just all surround me like, we've never seen a girl do that. Oh my God. The film guys even missed it because the film guys were set up for the other area and not where I went. And yeah, I felt alive. Like, it's the first time in so long that I just had excitement in my body and felt like kind of I belonged. Like, this is me. You know, and Shane was like, Wendy, you got to do the rest of the contest. You need to go to the SIA show in Vegas and go promote yourself. And I'm like, no, Shane, you know, I'm on a road trip to ski my last winter and never ski again. Like, I still kind of was on that path.
Right.
So then, you know, I woke up a few days after the contest was over and, you know, I ended up getting third. Like, the next day, I didn't even know the venue. I didn't even know where to go. So that definitely didn't help me. And then the third day, people showed me a line that was called dead end chutes. And like, Wendy, girls never ski this. So I trained it and I skied it. But came contest day, back then, the venue was very top of Phoenix Spellbound all the way to the bottom. It was a crushing run. And I'm still thinking as a ski racer, like, I know it's not a timed event, but I want to be the first one down as well as ski a rad line. So I end up hauling ass. And then I get to dead end chute and I am freaking floored. Like, my throat is on fire, super exhausted. And I go, screw it. No girls have ever skied this before. And I went around where I was showing the girls line, but then a few girls skied it and then beat me overall because of that. So I don't know. It was rewarding, I guess, in the way that I was told the girls never went there, but now they did.
Well, you were the one that blazed the path there, it sounds like, and then other people followed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to claim that, but
I'll claim it for you. Don't worry about it.
there was definitely a shift after that. And so I was in Crested Butte for a few more days, hanging out with my new boyfriend, Woody. And then one day I woke up and I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going back to Tahoe. I'm going to do the rest of the contest. I'm going to go promote myself. And I packed up my car and I drove back home to my parents' house and I did the Squaw comp. And again, I did a line that it was in the magazines the next year. Someone used it for an ad. It was this rocky face underneath the tram, barely any snow, but I found this patch that would connect to this ice ramp down this rock face. And I did that. And again, no girls went over there and ended up winning that contest. Then went to Kirkwood. And I remember I was looking at this line and I don't know Kirkwood well, even though I'm from Tahoe. I never skied it much, but I'm looking at the start and it's an air right from the start into this pocket. And I'm looking at it and this girl comes up to me and I'm kind of upset because I'm like, I don't want anyone to see where I'm going or where they even think I'm going to go. Like, I want this to be my line. I like to do original lines. Like, I always wanted to find an air because I'm like, you know, not a lot of girls do airs and I feel comfortable in the air. And I know my body position and all that stuff. So she comes up and looks over and she says to me, well, if there's any girl who can do this, it's you. And I remember being like, oh my God, did she just say something positive and nice? You know, I guess I was just kind of scarred from being with a lot of girls for too long. And I had the shell up because I didn't feel a lot of niceness and camaraderie and stuff like that in the past. And it happened to be Kristen Kramer, who's a badass guide up in Alaska. And I ended up doing that line and I won Kirkwood. Then I went to Vegas. And this was a little bit traumatizing because I went there and I just had never been to a ski show. I didn't know what it was all about. And I was super embarrassed. Like, I'm suddenly showing my face back into the ski racing world. And to me, I still am like, well, ski racing's the pinnacle. It's the top. Now what I'm doing, I'm having a lot of fun, but I know it was looked down upon and frowned upon in the hardcore skier world because everything was racing. And I had my tail between my legs, just super sheepish and scared to talk to companies. I felt ashamed. I wasn't owning this new path yet.
Well, you're not confident in being like the extreme badass because that hasn't been your history yet. You're a former racer, and that's what people know you as. And you have like 3 weeks of success or a couple months of success, but people don't know you as extreme Wendy. They know you as racer Wendy who's not racing anymore. So it's like you have to totally sell yourself on this. And some people in that room in Vegas might not even know what's happened at these extreme comps.
Right. The industry too wasn't accepting of it. I mean, Volant K2, that was about it. Other companies were like, racing's where it's at.
Right.
It took a lot of years for people to convert because even though Shane and Kent and those guys were making some noise in the free skiing world, it still wasn't legit yet. Like in the eyes of the hardcore business ski industry people. And I was really nervous about it, but Dynastar is the company I grew up racing on. I raced my whole career on Dynastar, and they ended up giving me $500 to go up to Alaska. And I went up to Alaska, and oh my God, I was so green. At the SIA show, I collected skins, but they were Raymorat skins, like military ones that you strap on.
Okay.
And then those plates that you put into your bindings so that you can skin up. So I had that. I think I got equipped with a backpack. I must have bought a beacon. I don't even know. Yeah. And then I got thrown up into Alaska and I didn't know anything at all.
When you get to Alaska for that first time and you see those peaks, is it just really, really intimidating?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, the contest is crazy because you don't get to ski the venue. You have to use binoculars or just look up. But actually we got to ski Odyssey. So I remember it was a cloudy day, so we couldn't fly and people were there early anyway. And I hooked up with a bunch of random people. I didn't even know who they all were. And everyone's just skinning up to the top of Odyssey. And I don't even think I really knew this was a venue, but I was just tagging along. And these are all new people to my life other than Shane, pretty much. So, you know, I think people were kind of taking me under their wing, like Chris Anthony and then Dean Cummings. So I get to the top and Dean's up there. And Odyssey is super, super steep top, you know, the top part. It just really rolls over. And I had never been on anything that steep. I actually was so confused because the light was flat and we're making hop turns. And I was so confused how steep it was. I'm like, when is this thing going to stop? And next thing you know, finally I can see the valley floor and the chute going in. And oh my God, the rollover to enter into it was so intimidating. I feel lucky I didn't fall and die that day.
Right.
But then he's the one who took me down that. And then I think I skied a line with Chris Anthony and he showed me some stuff. And I believe Chris and I won that day, the first day up there. Anyway, it was just a whole new rodeo world and experience and just going with the flow, not having any huge knowledge or itinerary or everything, which is kind of the way I am when I think about things like in my ski racing. The less I know, the better I do. Like, I really don't need all the details. I just need to feel like I belong and have fun. And it all kind of just comes together.
And when you have so many badasses in one place, given you're getting to meet a lot of these people and you haven't hung out with them a ton that first Alaska trip, but you have this insane crew of people, everybody's big personalities, everybody likes to throw down for the most part after the hill as well. So the big party culture, I would think, amongst all of the skiers. And I want to ask some party questions just because I would think the after parties to some of these contests when you're blowing off steam after skiing the biggest lines of your entire life have to be pretty fucking crazy. And who is the skier that you remember getting the most out of control? Like, describe a scene of just what's out of control in Alaska.
Oh, God, I don't know. It's so funny. I don't remember partying a ton. I would say Aaron McGovern was probably up in there and Seth. Those are the two that come to mind. The biggest party event that I really remember really clearly was in Las Salinas, Argentina the next year. We have photos of that night that it was insane. People hanging off of rafters. I was, and I think I landed on my ass and we called it, oh, I forgot the name of the restaurant, Allured. is Allura or something. I think the name of the restaurant. We all said we got allured because we were black. The floor was so disgusting, so much mush and beer and alcohol and snow and dirtiness that everyone just came out of there black with, whatever was on the floor. Yeah, I remember just so many people there. And that was a really fun night. And then to get down, because the restaurant was up on the mountain, we had torches, but they weren't the US style torches, the safe ones. They're the ones with the fuel that could cause lots of accidents or, nothing good can happen with fuel and flames.
Right.
But that was a really good time. So I guess, I've had pocket parties, in different locations, but I can't remember, anything dramatic up in Valdez other than I felt like I was growing hair on my chest when I was up there because I'm not a hard drinker. Like I don't drink a lot of hard alcohol, but somehow I was able to manage like Jim Beam straight. But then when I'd come back home to lower 48, I'd be like, how did I drink this up there? Oh my God, I can't touch this. But you just kind of evolve into feeling like you're in the middle of nowhere, Alaska with grizzly bears. And so why not drink some Jim Beam?
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elan Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elan's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elan ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elan's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elan skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elan and their skis, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. In thinking about events, you went to Los Laneless, you said. I think you won that event in South America. Mm-hmm. And you win a ton of events. I mean, there's just event after event after event. It's like you're either on the podium or you're winning these events. And while you had gone to Vegas to get some sponsors or at least get some money from Dynastar, I would think after you start winning big event after big event after big event, people are starting to really care about these events and sponsors do come calling. What are the brands that start supporting you when you start making real money from this?
Yeah, I just feel like I was at the right place, right time. I think that season of 1996 is when things changed. I won the Worlds and it was with Chris Davenport. And then that summer, I think was when Mike Jaquit got a bunch of us together to discuss Freeze magazine.
So were you at that initial meeting when you guys were all sitting at a table in Boulder?
Yep. Yeah, totally. And talking about Freeze magazine, and I really think that magazine, it's such a shame it's still not around. I really think it changed things, shifted the industry as well. And so, yeah, all of a sudden it was trickling to more and more companies catching on to the big mountain scene. So I did 1 year with Volant. They picked me up. And then the next year after that, I was at the SIA show and Solomon came to me. This guy, JP Barlow, reached out to me and he's like, Wendy, I want to see if you'll come to Solomon. So Solomon ended up being my big long time free skiing sponsor. And they were great for a while. And then things started to shift with them too. And the industry is shifting, of what they were interested in. But Solomon really just went all out. I thought, they used to fly me to Europe a lot to test skis, talk about ski design. Then they got into clothing and they involved me with talking about the clothing. And I really loved all of that. I loved being utilized, going on different trips. So yeah, in the early years, it was great and just jet setting. And, it's funny. I tell people that in elementary school, we used to have to write career reports. And I used to write that I wanted to be a flight attendant because I just wanted to travel. Like that was a big desire of mine growing up. And then I didn't become a flight attendant, but traveling was something I just truly loved and just felt like things lined up in my life to be able to keep traveling, which I still love to do today. So I think just keeping me busy and stuff kept me happy and put me in the right mindset.
So you're in the right mindset. I like to talk about finances. So you have Solomon as a major sponsor. I'm sure you've got some other ones as well that you'll probably throw out in a minute. But are you able to make more as a big mountain skier than you were as a racer ever?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Smith was the big one. They picked me up right from the beginning. I guess those are the two. I'm trying to think.
Are you having six-figure years?
Yeah, I would say only really one season did it really max out just past that.
Okay.
I was horrible at contracts. Like I remember doing contests and people would come up to me, Wendy, how much can you win in this contest that you're going to or whatever? I'm like, I have no idea. I'd be doing this whether there's money or not. Like I wasn't a good person to really put my foot down. Oh, I did end up getting an agent, IMG, actually. And yeah, J. Crew. I had a contract with J. Crew for a few years, helped design their clothing. But unfortunately, that got discontinued when J. Crew sold the company. Emily Woods, the original owner, sold the company to something else. And then they looked at the numbers and they're like, what's this ski thing? Let's axe that. So that went away. But for the few years that I was working with J. Crew, that was really fun. But yeah, I wasn't a fighter. I feel like I should have and could have made more. Unfortunately, I still am a little pissy about this, but when I got pregnant, Solomon didn't pay me. And I remember thinking that was super lame because I still skied and I still did stuff. Actually, when I was pregnant in 2004, I won the extremes here in Crested Butte, pregnant. Right. I didn't know it. I was a few months pregnant, and then I ended up getting second the next year, breastfeeding pumping behind the judges in between runs.
You're still doing it.
I'm still doing it, but...
Well, I look at it as, you said earlier, right place, right time, where you were for when big mountain skiing started, and you were right there. But when you got pregnant, it was like wrong place, wrong time, because if you were to get pregnant now, no brand is going to back off of a pregnant athlete. You know why? Because you're a woman and women get pregnant, and you don't drop someone because they're pregnant. You stand behind them, you let them have their baby and be a mother of their baby, and then come back to their career. And that's how it is these days. But back then, they just dropped you, huh?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they didn't drop me, but they just decided not to pay me. And again, I'm not someone who likes conflict, which was a big problem throughout my whole career. I just didn't stand up for myself, stick up for myself, put my foot down. So that was a moment that I just let it happen and shouldn't have. And then the other shift that was happening was park was starting, right? Yep. So now it's like, oh, we don't really need big mountain skiers anymore. Let's throw the money at the park skiers. So I definitely took a hit there as well. People are all into the new stuff. But, I was part of the X Games, the first women's ski across X Games. I helped get it in because the first year the X Games was here in Crested Butte, they didn't have women's ski across. And I kept getting in their face about it. And so the next year they brought it on. And again, that has evolved so much. For the first 5 or so years or more, I think, of skier cross, whoever got out of the start first determined the whole placing of the finish because there was no passing.
And 60% of the field was going to get hurt.
Yeah. And it just went bank turn to bank turn to bank turn. There was no really in-between passing area. And I remember being in the starting gate, and there were 6 of us, and the course is so teeny here in Crested Butte. You'd be floored if you saw the hill that they had it on. Like, really? They had a skier cross on that? But I remember I'm at the start, and I'm surrounded by all these former ski racer girls. Some I knew, some I didn't. People are clacking down their skis and kind of like growling, getting all fired up. And it brought me right back to my race years. I'm like, oh God, this is not my thing. And I did it. I had a crash. I ended up going to the Gravity Games. I did it at the Gravity Games too. And I was just like, this isn't me anymore. I'd already been doing big mountain skiing, and I decided that big mountain skiing, I'd just rather be me in the mountain and not me and other people. And I really liked being around the guys. I traveled pretty much exclusively with, a team of guys. And I just never felt the weird tension or not feeling like I belong. They were always super positive and supportive. I never felt like I was holding them back from anything. If anything, it just uplifted my skiing. And I'd be in a helicopter and Seth or Chris or someone would point out to a peak like, Wendy, does this look good to you? And I wasn't going to say no. I mean, in my head, I'm like, oh, shit. But I'd be like, yeah, looks good. And, and then we'd get there and try to figure out a line. And, those years were just great. And I still miss them. And that freedom and just pushing myself and the camaraderie that I felt like we all had.
Well, it's camaraderie and you guys are traveling the world together. You're still living like a vagabond. I mean, Crested Butte is home, but you're traveling a lot. And the next big comp we're going to talk about is Chamonix. It's the Red Bull Snow Thrill. And while we don't know much about Red Bull in the U.S. that much, really, at that point, Red Bull had already been around and they're doing stuff in Europe. And was that event, since Red Bull was a part of it, was it bigger than some of the other events you had been a part of because of the Red Bull effect?
No, I guess I didn't even realize Red Bull was a part of it. I did go to the Red Bull Rampage, I think it was, later in Cordova, Alaska. That was invite only. But the one in Chamonix, I didn't really notice the Red Bull impact yet.
I was only bringing that event up to transition to somewhere else. So You take second at that event. And when it's time to go home, some guys that you know from Crested Butte, Murray and Steve, they're there and they say, hey, Wendy, we want you to skip your flight and come film with us. And it's such a huge opportunity for you. Do you realize it then and just say, fuck it, I'm not going home?
Yeah. I was all packed, ready to catch a ride to the airport and get a knock on the door before leaving. And those guys were there and like, hey, Wendy, do you want to stick around and film? I was like, yeah, totally. And so that started the beginning of traveling with those guys. And it was so fun. I think that first trip was with Dean, Kent Kreitler, and Chris Davenport.
Yep.
Joe McBride was the photographer. He was a great guy. And it was a new chapter. And it's what I wanted. I remember, this is so cheesy, but this is like the ski racer professional side of me. But I think before they came and asked me, I actually wrote MSP, PGR, and Warren Miller, and like a letter expressing the interest of filming with them. And I only heard back from Warren Miller, and they said, just because you were a ski racer doesn't mean you know how to ski on film.
Oh, come on.
I remember that. I was like, oh, no. Yeah, and they posted that quote in freeze and overheard or whatever.
That's great.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah, so yeah, when they showed up, that was great. And when I came to Crested Butte, I decided I really just wanted a backcountry ski. Again, that's the workout side of me. Like, I just want to do a big skin and then one ski and how great that would be. And so I got into backcountry skiing. I took my level 1, level 2 avalanche. I took a guiding course. I, had thoughts of being a guide. But then when we were in Chamonix, our first, pretty much, I think is the first or second day of filming.
I heard it was the first.
Oh, first. Yeah. Okay. So on the front side, and I didn't know where I was. No idea. But we find this area to ski and I ski some turns and I hike back up to the top and someone does something else and everyone's doing their thing, but we all hike up back to the top. Then we decide to go and do some other lines. Kent goes to an area, Chris goes to an area, Dean and I go to the spot to go ski a shoot. And I lean on my poles and my poles go all the way down to the rocks. And I look at Dean, I go, isn't this bad snow? He goes, no, we're all good. I'm like, no, okay. He knows more than me.
Right.
And I'm not saying this to throw Dean under the bus. Like, there's so many different thought processes that go through in the mountains and stuff. But we ski down into our chute and then we have to hike out. And it's so freaking hot. Like, I take everything off of my jog bra and I'm hiking out of this chute. And now like little snowballs are rolling down. And Dean's like, let's get the hell off this thing. And I remember thinking, that's such a weird thing to say since everything's all good. But we hike up out of it and we're on like this little shelf that's midway down the mountain. And then Kreitler skis down to us, Chris skis to us, Steve Murray, Joe McBride, this guy Christopher, they cross the slope, they ski down to us. And then literally like seconds later, we hear this crack. And it's like a floodgate just opened up, this river of snow just flowing down and just below our feet. And Steve Winter starts yelling, I have an eye on him. I have an eye on him. And then, snow is gone. And it turned out that it was a killer loop photo shoot going on after we left that zone with snowboarders, and one snowboarder aired in and another one aired in after him. And that guy set the avalanche off on his friend in front of him. And then he ended up, I didn't even realize we're over like an 800-foot cliff. And so he got launched off of that and went all the way down to the valley floor. And I don't know, that kind of just changed my vision of being a guide.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to have, the responsibility of anybody's lives in my hands. That was just a bit much. Of course, it's great to learn those courses and learn more. And I pretty much was terrified from that point on, which I guess is a good thing because I was horribly clueless that whole day. And it really woke me up to what I was stepping into. And then early in my career also, that was that shoot. And then the next tragedy that happened was in Portillo, Chile, filming with Steve Winter was there, Murray Wais, Brant Moles, who else? Oh, Seth Morrison and Dave Swanwick. So we're all there to go film in Las Leñas. And we go free skiing the first day around the resort. Like Seth builds a kicker and was hitting it, and we're just hanging out. And the next day we go filming, and Seth had just had a broken ankle. So it's his first trip back. I still feel rookie-ish. I'm new. And I remember we're all getting ready, and I'm the first one ready. And Steve Winter says, all right, whoever's ready, get in the heli. And I was like, it shouldn't be me. So I look over at Seth. I'm like, Seth, you go. And he was like, well, whatever, like snarly, whatever.
Right.
And in Seth's way. So Seth gets in the helicopter. And now we're hanging out the helipad, chit-chatting, waiting for it to come back and just having conversations. And then our guide all of a sudden was like, this has been a while. I'll be right back. And turns out the heli went down. So that was very life changer, dramatic moment in that whole scenario too. Steve had a broken back, was paralyzed for a while. Of course, if anyone knows Steve, he's pretty back to normal. He's never skied again and still has some problems with that accident that he had. Of course, it took TR Youngstrom, who was this up and coming photographer, and that was so sad. Seth, they brought him in, and I remember going to the clinic to go talk to him, and he was talking and he seemed okay-ish, but then I started realizing he was talking about the day before, and I'm like, you guys, he's not okay. And he had multiple injuries. He definitely was hurt. And then the photographer passed away, and Greg Harms, the guide, he ended up not hurting anything, but it was like so traumatic impact that, he couldn't even move. And they pulled him out of there on a stretcher, and he was in the hospital for a little while, just recovering from the bruising and the trauma of it all. And unfortunately, we lost him last year, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But, made me realize I'm hopping in a helicopter and how dangerous and scary that is. So as much as how thrilling filming with those guys was, I also was like terrified almost every moment of the day, but it was a different sensation than feeling, I guess, sad and depressed. It was mixed feelings out there, putting your life on the line, but then sometimes having thoughts of not having a life. And to be honest, some of that kind of pushed me to be there. And even in my ski competitions, I always accepted I might get hurt. I always accepted I might die. I came to peace with that. I mean, I wouldn't say totally, of course, it's not what I would want to happen, but I opened myself to the possibilities so that wasn't holding me back. For instance, like in contests, I really have never hurt myself ski racing or even free skiing. I mean, I've broken my thumbs. My downhill crash was the worst thing. I've never blown out my knees or had surgery. So when I started looking at contests, again, I wanted to find harder lines, more challenging lines, and something that had an air. And it's not like I went and practiced the air or we'd had the chance to, but I look at it and I would tell myself I'm good enough to do that. And if it doesn't go well, I can see myself, maybe I'll break a leg, maybe I'll hurt myself, but whatever, skiing's a dangerous sport and I'm bound to hurt myself someday. Everyone does. And so that weirdly is my thought process when I would stand on top of a run, whether it's filming or contest. I was like, my day is going to come that I'm going to hurt myself if you keep doing this. And weirdly enough, I really have never had any bad injuries. I've ragdolled down many faces. Joe McBride one time mentioned to me, he's like, God, you're a natural crasher. I just would let it go, but I always walked away.
Well, at the end of the day, skiing like you were doing was a job, and with work, everyone has days where they don't want to go. Were there ever any days where it's like you wake up and the last thing you want to do is to get into a helicopter and go onto a big, steep Alaskan peak, but it's your job, people are there, everybody's ready to film, and it doesn't really matter how you feel, you have to go up there? Did it ever get to be like that?
I guess at the end, which is probably why I ended up moving on to the next chapter of my life, having kids. I felt like the camaraderie, a lot of us been traveling around together a lot. The snow conditions were bad at the last shoot. Just felt like tensions were high, and it didn't have that fun, or I wouldn't say fun factor, but just everyone having a good time. But otherwise, no, I was always ready to go. It's actually when it kicked in was every single peak I landed on. Like, people would be surprised to hear that I was scared pretty much every single run I ever took. So I was jazzed, ready to go until, like I said, someone to point out to a peak and be like, Wendy, how does that one look? And I would just be like, why the fuck do I do this? Oh my God. And I look at the peak and I'm like, sure, it looks good. And, study the line. And I would get at the top of the mountain and be so stressed out. Like, oh my God, what if it avalanches? And what if this happens and that happens? And all that stuff starts going in my head. So you make your game plan. You look at later on, when we had more money and we could get our own heli, we would land the heli, all get out. I would take a Polaroid of the venue because then I could look at that at the top.
Yep.
Because a lot of times you couldn't see anything but the valley floor. And it's so funny because nothing ever went smoothly. I just remember one of my best filming lines, I think, I believe it was in Squaw. Anyway, it's this place in Canada in the middle of nowhere at a fishing cabin. And I remember it had a big Berkshire at the bottom and it had different heights. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to go off the really huge part. So I would try to find where I wanted to exit. And if anyone knows, how to ski and to manage your slough, I wanted to ski at an angle to this exit so that I would always be avoiding my slough.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I told Murray this or someone, okay, I want to start up at this other point and this is where I want to exit. And I get up there and Seth's up there with me. And it was great. Seth looked at me. He's like, I'm scared too, Wendy. I'm like, oh, thank God, So Seth goes, and then it's my turn. I'm like, okay, am I in the right spot? And I hear, yeah, you're good. And I always had to have them count me off. I wouldn't go. I mean, I was seriously terrified. But again, I knew I was good enough to be there. I'm like, okay, I'm good enough to be here. They wouldn't have asked me to come here if they didn't think I could do this. Like, I had to go through a litany of self-talk to pump myself up that I'm legit and I deserve to do this run and I'm good. And so I'm at the top and they'd have to count me down. After a while, I'm like, okay, you just have to count me down. Because I just would go when they'd say 3, 2, 1, go. And then I just don't think about it anymore.
It's funny how that works with people.
Yeah. Oh my God. I need it. And I rolled over and right away I'm like, motherfucker, I'm right above like where I wanted to exit. And I'm like, shit. So I was like throttle down. I'm like, okay, this is where everything comes into play. Trying to make huge super G turns down this face. And I'm looking up and there's nothing yet. And each time I made a turn, I would look up and I'm seeing the slough collect. And I'm like, oh shit. And I make my final turn and hit the Berkshire and air off and ski up to Seth. First thing he said, he's like, I thought you were a goner. I'm like, me too. And then I was like, that was awesome. Then, I'm so stoked and I pulled it off and I was good enough. And, it just was full circle that I deserved to be there. And then we get in the heli and then we fly to the next mountain and it starts all over again because it's a new mountain, new snow conditions, new obstacles. So many highs and lows throughout the whole day because boy, when you would complete it and nail the run or the air, just so much awesome adrenaline. And then, I have all this confidence and then we fly to the next peak and I lose it all again.
It's just that cycle.
It was a lot of up and down battling that.
And then when you think about traveling with Seth or Shane or Dav, there's so many badasses that you're traveling with. But there's not that many women doing it with you. I mean, there are women out there skiing, but it doesn't seem like you're ever in a helicopter with other women. It's not like they're loading 4 girls and a bird and saying, hey, we're going to go hit this line over here. So did it totally suck not having another woman on most trips to vent and chat with?
No, I never. I mean, this sounds lame, but I never missed it. I just was better with guys. I mean, there's little complaining. I just felt, and I mean, people might get mad at me for saying this, but just felt on the ski team, there's just a lot of complaining, a lot of bitching about shit. And I just learned to keep my mouth shut. I didn't enjoy it. And again, I don't like conflict. I don't like hearing other people down, and I don't want to make people down. So I just learned to keep my mouth shut, which I think worked filming with these guys because I just kept my mouth shut. And I don't think because I'm a female, I did think, I'm like, okay, if I become whiny and complainy, they're not going to want me. And the fact that I'm female doesn't help. Like, it's easy to get booted off. But I even saw guys, I mean, I remember one time Seth's like, I will not film with this person anymore because it was a guy who just whined and complained too much. You can't have that out there, you know?
Yep.
And so I just felt like I belonged. I think I'm better at hanging out with guys at Burke. You know, I don't think I was really low there yet because there was some tension with some different girls, but there was always guys to hang out with. And I hung out with guys all the time. When I went back to reread my journals just this last fall, I wrote in there during my ski team years, like how much I missed my guy friends at Burke. And honestly, some of my best races were when we finally met up with guys so I could leave the girl pack. And I just felt like I fit in with guys a lot more. I actually have never really had many girlfriends until I had kids, where, you know, you start planning mommy play dates and hanging out with other women. So I definitely have a lot more girlfriends now, but up until then, not really. I didn't need them. I needed the guys. The guys gave me the support and push that really supported me as a skier.
What was cool back then was that women's segments were carved out and highlighted, it seemed like. So you might have been always traveling with the guys, but we knew that in every movie there was going to be one badass women's segment, it seemed like. So Reichhelm was the pioneer, but after her, every year we're going to see great stuff from you, Ulmer, Allison Gannett, Sarah Burke, Christy Leskinen as we got on in time. But these days you don't always get a badass segment. It's like, we want one every year with Michelle Parker or Angel Collinson, but we don't get that every year. Does it sometimes feel like things are going backwards?
I don't know why it's not panning out to have more women. Maybe it's financial. Maybe the crew hasn't found the right fit. And I don't want to say because they're female. I feel like even the men, like you have to find the right fit. I got used to traveling with the same people. You start to get a repertoire with each other and how much you trust them. And like when Chris Davenport or when Murray Wais or someone be like a line that I didn't see and they go, okay, Wendy, just ski down. And they're like, you got this. And I know they wouldn't put me on a line that they didn't think I could do. But it's hard to maybe find the crew that clicks together. But I don't know. I don't really know what's going on. I'm one of those people. And I feel like it's kind of lame, again, for me to say. But like when I left the ski team, I never saw anyone again. It was just like when I left college. Like I have reconnected with some teammates, but I kind of just left that world. And not to say that I've left the free ski world, but, you know, I went on to have kids and I kind of just dropped off, I guess, in the sense of paying attention to what's happening behind the scenes. So I honestly don't know what's happening. And I do think it's a shame because I think it's really inspirational and awesome to have a female segment in every movie.
I think it is too. And with you, you filmed with MSP for like 6 years or so, and you could have kept going with your skiing. What made you eventually call it a career?
You know, it kind of goes back to my, I guess, pattern. I started to kind of just feel a little lost again. And I don't know why, because I still love traveling, but I needed a shift. And I think when I get these thoughts in my head and the way I am, I feel like it's change needs to happen. And I didn't know what the change needed to be. But all of a sudden, I was like, yeah, maybe I need a new chapter now. The change, maybe it's having a kid, which I never even really thought about. I didn't think about kids. My husband and I, we didn't talk about kids a lot. So yeah, I ended up making the decision to go that path, which kind of put a halt to the jumping on a plane and traveling anywhere, which I still did a little bit. Anyway, unfortunately, I don't know if it's postpartum depression or what, but it actually even got worse. I mean, I became pretty mentally I guess, struggling the first 10 years of my kids' lives, if I'll be honest. I remember holding my son when he was a baby, and I'm like, what did I do? I'm like, I could be heli skiing right now in Alaska, but I'm holding this baby. And if anyone knows me and knows me as a mother, I put 100% into it. Like, I have totally tried to put them first. I still try to go on travel trips and sneak away. I remember when my second son was born, a girlfriend came to me and she said, Wendy, she's a car racer. She's like, there's this all women's off-road rally in Morocco, and I want you to be my teammate, but you just had a baby, so we'll wait till next year. I go, no, we'll go now. I'm like, I'm afraid you'll ask someone else and I'll miss my opportunity. So, my parents came in to help, and I went off for 3 weeks to France and Morocco and did this car race, came back, to be a mom again. But I still needed these escapes because it was just who I was. But I also I struggled, and I love my kids dearly. And I decided, they didn't ask to be born, so I need to put them first. But I'll be honest, I mean, I've been struggling for quite a few years because I do miss the travel, the adventure, just on a whim, packing up your bags and going somewhere. But, I'm in a stage right now, which is why I feel like I'm open to talking about this, that I'm actually feeling better and good about things. And now that I am the age that I am, I can reflect and see these patterns and try to kind of figure out maybe what sets me off, and can talk to people about my struggles and maybe help others. I have no idea, but maybe it's my next thing to try to help other people get through this, because it's a weird thing to bring up because I've never wanted to talk about it before, because those are like dangerous words, depression and suicide. I mean, they just set people off in a different way.
Sure.
And I just feel like they're not positive, uplifting words. And I've never been someone who wants to bring people down. So yeah, I've just always held that in. So yeah, I don't know why I stopped. I'm glad I did, in a sense, because I have 2 awesome boys that I love so much. But there is a part of me that I feel like I lost my identity a little bit, just because I loved skiing, and thank God I found it. After my racing career, after college, I did think like, oh my God, I've put so much time and energy into the sport, and there's nothing more to do with it. I wasn't ready to be a coach or a ski instructor. I do instruct now, and I love helping people become better skiers, but I wasn't ready yet. I still had to ski for me. So falling into the big mountain extreme skiing world, to use, the old term,
Sure.
it really did save me. It just was so rewarding to put my skiing to a new use. And honestly, I felt like I connected, right away, doing what I was doing with matchstick and the contest and backcountry skiing. I'm like, wow, this really feels like who I am. But it wasn't a thing back when we were growing up. It was racing or freestyle. And I'm glad I was a racer. It gave me so much foundation to be a confident skier. So when I stood on top of a peak, I could lean on that. And I knew I was good, which I never had that confidence as a ski racer. And I don't know why. But yeah, the big mountain skiing was my platform for sure. And really, really glad I discovered it. And it's definitely been what I love doing with my kids now.
No, it's awesome that you can share it with them. And at this point in the show, it's time for Inappropriate Questions. And since I wasn't planning on this being a 2-parter, I had to scramble to get another set of questions for you. But I was able to, yeah. And I was able to get one of the most important people in your career, one of the masterminds behind MSP, Murray Wais. I know you travel a lot with Murray. You may have even lived with them at one point. I'm not sure. But I will let you know that Murray's Inappropriate Questions are going to be a little easier than what Lotzi had to ask. And are you ready for question number 1?
Okay, yes.
All right, Wendy, you were in the early days of women's free skiing when female inclusion was considered one woman in a cast of 20 men, and that was considered letting the women be part of it. Traveling with all those men all the time, what was your least favorite part of that?
Oh my God. I had no non-favorite part. Well, I guess just one thing I want to say off of that is when I first started traveling with them, of course, I didn't drink a lot, and I still having my weird eating thing. We go out to dinner And of course, we split bills. And I wasn't going to say, oh, I only had one drink and a salad. So we just end up splitting it all. And what I started doing is watching them. When they'd order another drink, I'd order another drink because I'm like, I'm not going to pay for their drinks. They're going to pay for mine. And so I started doing drink for drink with them. Like, oh, they're ordering another drink. And I remember Murray, oh God, he's into Crown Royals and ginger ale. So that became my drink for a while. But I didn't have any, I have to say I had nothing bad. I have nothing bad or hatred to say about traveling with them. I really liked it all.
That's awesome. We'll go to question number 2.
Okay, Wendy, skis were changing a lot in the 90s when you were filming. What was the worst ski that you were ever on from a manufacturer, and why did it suck so bad?
Well, I don't want to diss a manufacturer. I mean, I have to say skiing on 200 GS skis with Derby Flex wasn't the best thing ever. I would say when I was on Volant, I took those up and I remember I was skiing on them in Alaska. I just didn't connect with the skis. I know they were Shane skis and stuff, but yeah, for some reason I didn't connect with them. I can't tell you why, but I really tried to never blame my equipment for any bad skiing that I ever did, which I felt I needed to figure out the ski. And so I guess I would just say Volant, but I also don't want to bag on them. Maybe I just couldn't figure out how to ski them.
Well, it's easy to go with Volant because they're not in business anymore, so you can say Volant and you're not really going to piss off that many people.
Yeah.
We will go with his final inappropriate question.
Filming in Alaska in the 90s was really tricky, Wendy, because the mountains would roll over and you could never tell where to go on your line once you got on top of the mountain. And I think for you, it was especially hard because you're always second guessing yourself. Shane McConkey always had a famous saying, just ski down there and huck off of something. Is it true that that quote came from Shane yelling that at you?
It might have been. Yes, Murray is totally right. And I even just described it in an earlier comment that I would get lost. I got lost a lot and most of the time worked out. There are some of my favorite runs. I think in Global Stormy, I caught these huge airs and I didn't mean to hit that spot. And I remember I was on a shoot with Shane and I'm like, Shane, I always mess up my line. And he had a radio and I had an earpiece and I go, okay, this is where I want to go. And I explained the line. I'm like, okay, I'm going to ski to that little blip in the snow right there. And then I'm going to go along this little snow ridge that you can see. And then I'm going to cut across. There's 3 little snow ridges. Like you have to find the most minute little things because you have no trees, you have no gates, no rocks. I'm like, I'm going to go off that 3rd little snow feature to catch my air. Let me know if I'm on my line or whatever. So I'm skiing down and I'm kind of on the wrong ripple, don't realize it. And Shane's like, you're on your line. And I dive in and go off the cliff in the biggest part of it, which I didn't have the confidence of doing, but I stuck it and ski down. And he's like, yeah, that was rad. That was so much better. I'm like, I didn't mean to go there. You said I was on my line. I dived in, so again, I knew I could figure things out. I was a good enough skier to pull things off like that. And it happened quite often. So yeah, Murray knows me very well. That was one of the reasons I'd probably freak out at the start so much is at the top, because I'm like, oh God, am I going to miss my line? And I was one of those ski racers who did not memorize courses really, really well or tried. But boy, when I got into big mountain skiing and filming and contests, I tried to memorize more than ever before because there was so much on the line.
All right. Well, Wendy, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that is our podcast. And I will tell you, I love podcasts like this, and I say that all the time. But with yours, it's not just the skiing that I love. I mean, yeah, you were an amazing racer, and then that didn't work out for you, and then you kind of pioneered the big mountains for women, and you were all over MSP, and they kind of defined my 20s. I feel like I really was just, all about everything that they were doing, and you were a big part of that. But the part of the podcast I love is just how open you are with all the things that you've gone through in life, because it would have been really easy for you to just not talk about some of the ups and downs that you went through, but you were very transparent and talked about them all. And I hope that helps you just getting it out there, but it's really great to hear your story because I think it's going to help a lot of other people. And while I've always respected and loved everything about your career, I love it even more now after having this conversation with you, and I thank you for your time.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for including me in your podcast. I think you are a great interviewer and you make it easy to talk. So I'm really glad I was a part of this.
So that was time with Wendy Fisher, and man, that was a heavy one. It's really cool that Wendy shared so much with us. While I did know about some of the issues she was dealing with, I had no idea the extent of them. It's like I looked at Wendy as the queen of free skiing, and there was no reason for her not to be happy and stoked on life. It looked like everything was going for her. But that's the problem. A lot of us, me included, judge a book by its cover and assume that everything is perfect, and that's not the case. Sometimes some people are hurting out there, and we need to be aware of that. It kind of brings me back to New Year's resolutions. When I shared my 2021 New Year's resolution of losing weight, that was a selfish resolution that was all about vanity. And for those of you that care, I'm still 40 pounds lighter than I was in 2020. But in 2022, my New Year's resolution was not about vanity. It was to be a nicer person all around, to strangers, to my family, to everyone. And the reason for this is I wanted to set a good example for my kid. During the pandemic, I snapped on a stranger while we were skiing and a good friend, and I blame it all on the pandemic. But the more I think about that, the more I've got to realize that I don't know what's going on in someone else's head, and there is no reason for me to be a jerk. So if I treat people with kindness, maybe that little bit of kindness will be what they need to get through the day. And while I'm sure I can still be a dick, I'm getting a lot better. And that's where I'm going to end this podcast. At this point, I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen to me. If I find your review and I read it on the show, email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. And before I forget, here's the short, sweet review of the week that I received this week. It comes from Rye Dogger. It's a 5-star review, and here's what Rye had to say. So good, entertaining, informative, just really great listening. Thank you, Mike Powell. No, thank you, Rye Dog. Reviews don't get any better than that. Well, they do, but the short ones don't, and I appreciate you for sending that in. You know what to do to get your beanie, so Rye Dogger and everyone else out there, thank you for listening, and please support the amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, and the Hess Sleep System. Have a great week, everyone.